but I know more than the teachers, blah, blah, blah. And then now, like you said, that's this kind of the world we unfortunately live in.
And we hear more about it today. So it's skewed somewhat, but is on the increase. Violent crime is trending down because we're aging as a population, but this particular type of crime is trending up. And so I like to think about it as a purposeful suicide, because most people that engage one of these targeted violence events are not going to live throughout the day, and they know that going into it. And so I would think maybe in the past, maybe some people just kill themselves, but now, they learn from other people, and they see other people get what they perceive as fame and all that. So one thing I avoid doing is talking about the names of the folks that do these. I don't want to give them anything, any credibility, but it's trending up. For whatever reason, they're trending up. And, I had a sociology professor fight with me at one presentation one time about why it was trending up, and that's fine. But for whatever reason it is, so we need to prepare for it, regrettably. People can get more lethal because it keeps getting easier and easier, and people learn from each other.
Nope. Changing to a slightly lighter topic.
Okay, I'm waiting for my point to start asking stupid questions.
No,
so you ask good ones. So
It's fine. If there's anybody, if you're watching on Twitch right now, if you can comment in the section, the comment board, if you can still see what's going on, it's not.
What do you mean?
Like,
no,
Twitch
it's back on.
It just shut down completely. I had a
No,
couple other streams
we're
going.
back on now.
It's not on for me.
Garden,
Twitch
you're fine.
Fine.
You were
You don't
downloading
worry
too much
about that.
adult
Let me
content.
worry about that.
Yeah, that's his job. Are you getting a refill? Good. I'm just curious, going back to more the small business vein of our conversation, can you talk about your progression from being a pastor to an FBI agent?
Yeah,
and
no,
now
that's a very interesting progression.
Yeah, and there's not a lot of me. I met one other agent once that had the same progression, but that's the only one. Most people progress to ministerial, redemptive kind of work after.
It'd be after,
law
yeah.
enforcement,
Okay.
Yeah. But I believe that God led me into it, to be, chances are I shouldn't have been what I am, because, it's such a hard job to get. And I applied for at least 40, 50 positions, and that's the one that hired me. When I started out, I found the brochure. I was applying for all sorts of different positions. My wife and I both thought there's no chance, but why not? What's the harm? And I kept passing, and it was shocking because of my first introduction to it is I got invited for the written test, and there's like 40 people that met together in the Minneapolis office at the time, and cause that's where I came in through, and they were lawyers and accountants and like federal agents from other agencies switching, and I'm like, one of these things doesn't belong, I'll tell you. But then about half of them disappeared after that test, and then I got invited to the second test, which is an oral interview, and once again, same group, the half that survived, and I felt like a fish out of water, just very different background, and but then half of them disappeared, and I kept on going. And then there's a whole polygraph, background interviews, and all that, and that kept going. And 6 months later, at Quantico, it was just two of us from the original group I started with, and I think it's been a good use of my gifts and who I am, and my God's a God of justice, I used to say. I came up with that when I was at Quantico, trying to explain the progression. And we deal with a lot of people in very difficult situations, and some of those pastoral skills came into play. Like I dealt with child prostitution for 4 years, and working with a lot of victims.
So how far did you finish your pastoral degree? Were you pastoring at a church at the time, or?
Yeah, I was a licensed minister. My wife and I both worked for about 7 years.
Okay.
So was a school teacher at a private school for a couple of years, youth pastor, young adult pastor, associate pastor.
And in the pastoral position, you're doing you're not just a pastor. You're helping people out with their marital problems, with you're a counselor as well, and a confidant and all that stuff. And I'm sure that helped as well in the
and there's certain cases that it really helped having some background in church life and things, so it worked out well. And then I also had a master's in psychology before I got in, so that helped. It all kind of came together, and I was a supervisor in a business, and I think that helped me too. part of the way to get into be an FBI agent, a little clue here for folks if you're interested, is life experience. The average age of a new agent's 30.
Oh,
That's
wow.
what I was when I got in, because you have to have done something. You can't just have a degree, and that's all good, but you have to have done something.
You see, like, there's not a lot of agents coming right out of Quantico, like, right out of, like, having a college degree and then going into Quantico. And
It'd be
then
pretty
rare.
pretty rare.
TV has lied to me.
TV always lies.
Yeah.
So but
These
they-
are where all my stupid questions are coming from, and they're
Yeah.
going to be great.
They did film Silence of the Lambs on the campus of Quantico, so
That's true.
That part's real.
That part's real. The trails are real. So I don't know beyond.
And it's a really good movie, so...
I mean, for having that life experience, is that strictly for someone that's going to be in a field office? Or, I mean, if you have, a buddy of mine, he's fluent in 7 or 8 different languages.
Wow.
And I know he
Yeah,
got approached pretty much right out the gate by a few different government agencies to be a translator for stuff.
Yep.
Granted, not everybody off the street is speaking fluent in conversation.
that's a
8
little
languages.
different there, Gardo.
But I mean, if you have the right degree, is there a chance that you could get, the desk job or, whatever you?
Well, there's 2 types of work in the bureau. There's support and there's agents. So and that we have in support, which can be very high speed. We have scientists, linguists. We do a lot of intelligence folks now come in, financial analysts. So there's a lot of really high speed folks, but that's a different type of work.
Okay.
So versus
Those are nerds.
those are smart.
Says the guy who wrote code.
So those are
his
smart
right.
Who
people.
writes?
Right.
Thank you very much.
But then the agents, it's a different animal. And most of those folks tend to get hired, like I said, the average age is 30, more life experience and things like that. Some are younger. I mean, I know people that got in at 25, 26. Some.
So field agents are more... or people who are dealing with other people are older and they have the life experience, and the
Well,
people who are
to have the
analysts,
the
and-
law enforcement piece of it, then tend to be 30, tend to be older. Skews that way.
Okay.
And to
That's
backtrack,
good news. I just made a career change.
Right?
I'm 30.
There you go. You don't have
Useful.
sharpen chainsaws.
useful.
Do that for
experience, yeah.
the bureau doesn't have.
Which
I mean, they
Unless,
might have chainsaws.
is the
I
Fargo
don't know.
office hiring?
Now, if
Oh,
funny
hey
you
there.
asked that. Well, the reason a lot of people hesitate from it is when you sign up saying, I'll go anywhere. It's the needs of the Bureau. So it's kind of like the military that way. So needs of the Bureau. And so you go to Quantico, and about 6 weeks into Quantico, you open up an envelope, and that says where you're going. And then you could be there for a long time. It just depends. And you're allowed one move. And things change over time, but I think roughly it's still the same where you're allowed one move of your choice. But you have to get on the list to go somewhere.
Right.
So it might be 12 years to get to Fargo or somewhere.
12 years to Fargo. Whoever did that?
Some of us like being left alone.
Drecker is up there
Casey.
now, so it's not as bad.
If you want to go to New York or Detroit, we'll get you there quicker, right? But to come back to Minneapolis, it might take a while. So
Right.
it is what it is. So that's kind of a deterrent somewhat, and that's how you're curious. It's needs at the Bureau. And so if you have certain set of skills, like your friend with languages, that might decide where you spend your time, and that's gonna skew that way for you. And you're always on call, and like I said, I got voluntold. It is what it is. I got that more than once in my career. I got voluntold into new jobs because it's the needs at the time.
When you agree to join, you're at Quantico. You said, you get this envelope. This is where you're going. Is it anything like I'm in the private sector? My company says, if you're willing to transfer, where would you like to go? And you put like 3 different options.
Yep, you get to list all 56 offices in order,
Okay.
and it might mean a lot or it might mean nothing. Depends on that week.
Right.
You
You get a list of in order.
Yeah.
But
and I got number 6.
There's an intern there with a dart thrown at the wall.
the ones with snow are at the bottom.
So I got number 6. So I was one of the higher picks in my class. Some people were very happy, and some people were devastated.
So,
it is what it is.
not number 6, like you get your 6th pick?
Six,
or-
6 on the list. So
Oh,
I
okay.
listed down, and number 6 for me was Springfield Division, and so I started out there.
Okay.
What change? Going on that vein, you're married at this time. So how did having a family in that situation?
It could be a challenging job. There's some real benefits to it, but some real. And I had 2 little ones at the time too. And being on call 24/7 can be tough for spouses working and traveling. Needs of the bureau comes first.
So you don't get a lot of vacation. Or
You do.
anything.
You get a fair amount of vacation, but you might have to cancel it if you have a trial. People end up eating their plane tickets or whatever for vacations or missing holidays because if there's a trial, there's a trial, and they're not going to change that for you. So it's that needs of the bureau. But generally speaking, it was great for my family. And the type of the nice thing is once you get in, you get assigned to the work they need you to do, but then eventually you can put your name where you want to go. So I did white collar for 7 years, which I loved. It was a great schedule, and then did more reactive work for a while, and that was kind of fun. But after 4 years, I got burned out on that. Then went back to something more regulated, and my last 4 years was very right because it was training. So and there's no such thing as a training emergency, right? So that was a good way to kind of ease out.
All right, this is my dumbest question. I honestly have to ask it. I can't not. I'm sorry.
Okay.
No. All right, so I really liked the show White Collar, which dealt with the FBI and a criminal consultant who wore fun hats. So did you ever have a criminal consultant who wore fun hats while you're working with White Collar?
I never watched that show.
Oh,
Sorry.
okay.
No, but,
It's
but what
a
we
lot of
do
fun.
have, and that, I'll jump off that if that's okay, is
Yeah.
we have local partners. So every time I worked a case, I always had a local partner. So whether it was Roseville PD, Minneapolis PD, St. Paul, BCA, and then we worked together. And we're good at that. Despite what the movies show, we're really good at working together with our local partners.
So it wasn't always, the Fed showed up.
No.
Got that from Tommy Lee Jones movies, I'm sorry.
No. I'm with the FBI. No. People will give you a hard time about that, but just jokingly. But you have all your, you get these contacts and you work together. And then, because the locals are much better at some things than we are, and we're pretty good at some other things. So
Okay.
you kind of each bring your strength to it. And then in the end, you see who can best prosecute something.
Oh, nice.
You
Okay.
know, so we have our local partners, and then within the bureau, we have a lot of help there, like the accountant types, like we mentioned earlier. So we have forensic accountants that are brilliant at that, and I can't do that, but they can.
And you can, and the FBI can pull them from all over the country, and
They can, but within each office, it's pretty deep. We
Oh,
got
is
a
it?
lot
Okay.
of good resources, and when you have something big, like a big kidnapping, then yeah, you can get whatever you want, and headquarters will send whatever resources. And
Like to hit home a little bit, the
Jamie Claus.
yeah, Jamie Clausen
Yeah,
out
yeah.
there. They, 2 days, 3 days after it all happened, they mentioned the FBI is now working in conjunction with Barron County Sheriff, and
yeah, they're probably there that day. Is how it works. Is so there's a lot of local smaller offices outside the big field offices, and they'll have contacts, and they're probably up there that within hours, and then they're working together. And then a lot of times our job at that point is to bring in federal resources and kind of manage that, and then come up with a plan, because kidnappings, it's a federal violations, but most likely they end up being a murder or something that's not going to be a federal violation, but we're allowed to work together assuming that it could be.
so how does something like the current federal not getting into politics of it or anything, but like just the shutdown itself affect something like the FBI?
Well, I've been through a couple of them
Okay.
in my career, and we still work, we just don't get paid, so it doesn't change
So,
the
like-
response.
Does the whole agency work, or is it?
You
Or is
know,
it pared down?
some people might be considered non-essential, but most people are. So the public wouldn't see a difference in
difference, okay.
response at all.
well, if you, for example, were in a shutdown and you weren't working in a case, you just happened to be kind of a week that was in between, would you then be considered non-essential?
No, you're
Oh,
always essential.
okay.
And you're never not working a case. You know how it works, and that's kind of the nice thing about being an agent is you kind of generate your work, and so you have an area of expertise, an area you're working in. You always have lots to do, and so you're kind of working on multiple things at a time. There's never a down season. It might be a little bit slower, but more intense, but there's always plenty to do. So always essential, yeah.
As I mentioned off air, I got about 24 people asking me to ask this stupid question.
I'll ask the stupid questions.
Sure.
I volunteer as tribute.
People going, oh, you have an FBI agent? Well, you need to ask them. So I'm just going to ask to appease them and get them off my ass after the show. Do you or can you answer who killed JFK?
No.
Perfect. That's all I need.
That's a CIA problem, moron.
Jesus Christ.
God
I
damn
think
it!
that-
Why are you so dumb?
That might just be the answer to the question, Casey.
No, as soon as I
I
start
get
talking,
asked a lot of questions when I speak, and
Yeah, no, that's a
that's
CIA
one
thing.
that I would have no knowledge about.
yeah,
Is there
Do you know any CIA agents we could ask?
Next question.
You neither confirm nor deny that. Is there a favorite case that you can talk about? I missed the pre-show.
No, that's a good question. I think, generally speaking, some of the prostitution cases, which were the hardest but the most rewarding, putting in federal. If you do something with a minor federally, there's a big hit. There's mandatory minimum sentences. So that's which I'm very glad about. But some of those cases were very rewarding because those folks are just going to keep on rolling with it. And there was a couple and that took a long time with a lot of different victims, and that's probably the most rewarding work. But also again, the most takes the biggest toll too at the same time.
It's a heavy thing, but you're doing good.
Yeah. So yeah, I think that would probably be along there. And white collar was fun too. I really loved embezzlement cases, Ponzi schemes. Because you're dealing with people. Love working with people.
Did you do that stuff like in this area, or were you stationed elsewhere?
Minneapolis field office for 18 years.
Okay.
So most of my career was there.
All right.
asking for somebody out there, that's thinking, hey, maybe I want to go FBI and do this kind of stuff. I mean, how hard is it, or how hard was it for you, if at all, to separate? Well, I'm at work now, and when I go home, work stops. I'm now with my family. I mean, is there bleed through often? I mean, you see the movies where it's the or TV shows. It's the distressed agent who, loses his wife and kid because he's bringing work home too much.
We've all seen True Detective.
Yeah. I've only seen a Criminal Minds, if you will.
Well, I think generally with law enforcement, you're dealing with some really rough stuff consistently. And some of the local law enforcement, God bless them, they see a lot more, hitting those domestics repeatedly, or you see a lot, and it can take a toll. So you have to be purposeful. And the Bureau's pretty good about that. We have ancillary duties in the FBI, so I was a negotiator for a while, but I also was the EAP coordinator, or employee assistance coordinator for our office for about 16 years. So giving resources to our folks to help them when things get challenging and overwhelming. And the Bureau's also good that after, a number of years of doing type of work, if you want to switch, there's lots of type of work we do. And all you got to do is ask. And, that happened to me. I got switched out to something different after a while because I had enough of a particular type of work. So
Gordon?
you can survive it. You just have to be, I think, purposeful.
And what about, if there's any current, law enforcement or FBI agents that happen to listen to this episode, is there, support groups, especially for if you're dealing with that harder stuff? Is there somewhere that you can go and just kind of talk to somebody that might, better understand than, your buddy down at the bar would?
Right. Yeah, and, alcohol could be a problem.
Yeah.
It's a great way to self-medicate. I think it's the wrong setting to say that, but...
You're not wrong. That's why
Yeah.
we're all drinking. So,
But, I know within agencies they have things set up. A lot of times law enforcement types were all a bit suspicious. It just kind of comes with the territory. And but there's always independent folks that are of good quality out there.
What's the line from The Departed, the remake? The guy that
That
goes to
was not the
Mars.
line.
I know that. The guy that goes to Mars. What's his name?
Matt Damon.
Matt Damon. He's sitting down with the psychological therapist person. He goes, "Well, you're a
going to Mars
therapist
in that
with a
movie."
bunch of Mick cops in Boston. You're really up Schitt's Creek. I mean, is it that kind of in house, if you will, or I mean,
in-house. I mean, we were great. We had great resources. We had a great list of folks, lots of people to choose from to go get assistance with. But there's a lot of good assistance you can find independently. But there's no reason not to get help. There's plenty of good resources out there for anybody, and some of the work can take a toll.
We've been talking for like an hour 15. Gordon, I mean, I have one last question,
Yeah.
but
I have one more, and then I'll shut
all
up.
right. So let me start with my stupid one, and then you can end with your serious
Perfect.
one. All right. So at the beginning of this, you said robbing a bank is real dumb.
Yes.
So like, I don't know. I love movies like The Heat and stuff like that. Like
Great
like.
line. Yeah.
Like just really like good bank robbery movies.
Baby
When
Driver.
did it become stupid to rob a bank?
I
No,
think-
no, just it, like
I
I
think
mean,
it's
because
been consistently stupid, but
Well-
as technology improves, it's the cameras are so good nowadays.
Okay.
It's just not a good idea.
well, I mean, like because you look at like things like the James Younger gang, like they had public opinion on their side
right.
in
and
certain
s-
parts of the country.
in certain parts of the country. Not once they got up north. They went out of their range.
Right.
Back
They lost the
Bon-
south. on that
Jesse
one.
James Day era,
Yeah,
Bonnie and Clyde.
that's literally what I was talking about.
Well,
Insane
I'm
decision.
from Northfield. That's my
Yeah,
hometown.
Yeah,
Oh, yeah,
it
yeah.
just
my-
No,
and
yeah.
that's the first time I went to.
But yeah, no, like I'm curious, like when did technology like overtake that? Was it like the 50s, the 60s?
I think within my career time, even the 20
really?
years I was in, I saw dramatic changes with technological abilities, and it just don't rob a bank. Bad
Well, like
idea.
we had one story on the show where we talked about some dude who robbed a bank and then tried to get away by floating down the river on
yeah,
an
yeah.
inner tube.
Yeah, I think I know that.
Points for curiosity, creativity rather. Sorry.
Yeah, I mean,
It's not fast enough.
I'll just put out there: crime in general, don't do it.
Doesn't
Yeah.
pay.
Yeah.
Don't do it.
Just go get a job.
No upside to it.
I know plenty of people hiring.
And the problem with bank robberies, it's dangerous. It's you're not going to make much, and it's a very dangerous. People get hurt, and you'll get caught. It's just not a good
I
idea.
got a good story to see if you know anything about it off air, but
I'm just curious. Off of that, talking about bank robberies in particular, like bank robbery is what built the FBI in a big way. I think if you look at the history, it's what pushed. I think
Was it the FBI or the Pinkertons? Oh, sorry, I'm playing
No,
a lot
I
of
mean-
Red Dead.
There's an element to that.
Yeah.
For sure.
the more notorious and successful a criminal group got, the more then all of a sudden the agency was able to say, like, we need these resources.
Well,
to
there's the
match
reason
them.
we had the Untouchables. Really
Right.
like that movie.
Well, it's a big thing in like the 20s. Like the bad guys had bigger caliber guns and faster cars.
Right, and the bureau originally wasn't armed at all.
Right.
So
And then they were armed with like 38s, and the bad guys were
for
shooting
a
45.
long time.
And they had inline 6-cylinder Fords, and the bad guys had V8s.
Well, because the bad guys also raced NASCAR,
Well, NASCAR started out of moonshining.
which was the bad guys.
Well, it depends on who you ask. So, yeah, no, it's fascinating.
no. When I had to duck out for a second, kind of got me thinking on a residential or more personal level. I mean, the stuff that we talk about. Have you ever worked with, whether I know there's a women's shelter or anything.
I live right
a
next to it,
shelter like
actually.
that. I mean, have you ever worked with, or the advice that you've given these larger businesses? Is that advice applicable? The run first, if not hide.
It's applicable everywhere. And then I should also say, let me just hit real quick, that it's not just that what I teach, but we always start with situational awareness. So that we always start training with giving people questions to develop their situational awareness. Because if you're not aware of what's going on around you, it'd be too late anyway to do anything. And then locking in some personal safety too is a part of it. So it's not just because chances are you're not going to be in an active shooter event, right? But there's a good chance you're going to be in some type of violent encounter in your life. So we also then every time I do one of these, I also give a lot of tips about how to prepare for that getting jumped in the parking lot, or a parking structure, or being involved when you're in a bank and it's robbed, or some type of violent encounter in your life, and how to prepare for that ahead of time. And then we do the active shooter. But the other thing too, which is like I said, is important, is the pre-event indicators of violence, and everybody should know that because we're all around. If everybody was on board with looking out for pre-event indicators of violence, and everybody knew how to respond when a violent situation occurred, how many lives would be saved, right? And so just getting this information out, I think, is key.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, in a situation that'd be perfect because situational awareness is the first step. And if people are situation aware, they're going to pick up that there's a car that's been occasionally sitting out there, and I don't know who they are, you know, and they're kind of showing up on a regular basis. Or you can pick up on, you know, I teach people to trust their spidey sense.
Mm-hmm.
You know, if you don't feel like something's right because you're aware of what's going on around you, you can respond to it and start getting ready to respond.
I've exhausted all my questions. Ben, Casey, do you have anything
All
else?
I have is stupid. So.
I think to close out, what's the most common question you get, and what's the biggest takeaway you want our listeners to have?
Most common question is, boy, how to become the FBI? Get in the FBI. Get that one all the time. I think we kind of covered that.
Yeah.
But the takeaway is that I want as many people as possible to think about their safety ahead of time. So be situationally aware of what's going on around you and have some things you can do about it. So have some improvised weapons, have a way to lock your door if you can't run, and then study run, hide, fight, and then share it with others. Because if we all did that, the body counts would be way down. And I think that's how we save lives.
I actually have a decent question, I think.
Wow.
I know, right?
We're gonna go
It's
for a 2-hour
impressive,
episode.
right? No, so when you go into all these places, is there one where you were just like, what are you guys doing? Like, is there one that you've walked into and you're like, no, you're doing everything completely wrong?
No,
I mean, you have to name it by name, but like,
no, I think because if I'm coming in, that means they're thinking about it.
okay.
So I think they're way ahead of the curve. As long
Alright.
as you're thinking about it and start preparing, you're doing better than most, right? I think I'm concerned about the people that don't think about it, and those are the ones I don't talk to. You know, and I get a little concerned when people take run off the table, and most people now have gotten off the shelter in place or the lockdown. So I like having run as an option in every
So
setting.
did the shelter in place just come from it was no real experience with shooters, and then like that was just kind of like the go-to with shelter in place?
You know, I'm not sure where. That's a good question, and I haven't thought that through.
The first time I encountered the shelter in place was post Columbine, which I remember. I don't know, when was that?
99.
99. Was it 99?
Yeah,
I thought it was
98 or
early.
99.
I thought it was before that. Anyway, I remember.
No, you're just young.
Yeah. I remember seeing that. I remember seeing the news footage of the students running and teachers running out of there. But then I remember by the time I got to middle school and high school, it was lock the door, barricade the door with a table, and then hide in the corner.
But that shelter, yeah.
Yeah, and it's the K-12 schools that really have that as the key way to respond. But I want run. And that's, you know, hiding's great if you can't run, but you got to have run as an option for teachers. Because how many classrooms windows do open? Why not get kids out? You know, and maybe it's in the gym, something's happening. If you're close to the door, why not get them out? There's no downside to running if you can, because it's hard at a moving target,
Right.
and you want people spread out. You never want to cluster together.
Maybe
Most settings are good with run, high, fight. It's the K-12 schools I tend up getting in more fights with, but they're evolving. I'm finding more and more schools coming over to the other side.
And so, for anybody out there, you know, if they're retiring law enforcement, firefighter, or FBI, and they want to kind of create their own company similar to yours, I mean, not to create competition for you.
No, I should be the only one doing this.
I mean, do you have any words of advice for them? I know marketing can be a bit of a nightmare some days.
You know, I haven't done many really. It's been word of mouth. So I think if you put out a good product, I mean, that's people will refer you to others, and stick with your strengths. You developed a lifetime of experience. I mean, the Bureau was a gift in that for 4 years, this is all they had me do. And so, they trained me in it, and it gave me a great starting point. I could never just launched a business. I already knew a lot of people and had the experience. So go with your experience, put out a good product, and it's really easy. I mean, Squarespace, it's kind of a no-brainer, and so it's been a good experience for me. I've sure enjoyed doing it.
And if Squarespace would like to sponsor this,
No, Gordon, you
No.
just have to reach out to them, and then you can get the referral link. It's not hard.
oh, fantastic! And more importantly, Joe, if somebody wants to work with you, what's the easiest way for them to get in contact with you?
Sure. My website is allpointsn.com. Somebody already had north, so I couldn't get that. So www.allpointsn.com. Or you can email me at konajoe629@gmail.com.
And if there's one piece of advice you'd like to leave everybody with before we sign off.
I'd say learn, run, hide, fight, and share it with those you love.
Speaking of Run, Hide, Fight, it is Run, Hide, Fight at Ready Houston on YouTube. So if you just search Run, Hide, Fight Houston, that's the video that Joe was talking about earlier. So
Nice.
Great. That's a good one.
Perfect. Yeah, and if my super producer Casey,
I didn't know if you wanted me to run the outro music yet or not. You didn't give me any kind of indication, bud.
I said
Nonverbal
I ran out of all
communication.
my questions.
You didn't send me a pre-list of all your questions.
Yeah, I did.
Oh, music, please. Casey.
Anyway, thank you everyone for listening into episode 18 of Rules Arena and with Joe from All Points North Consulting. If you have any questions, comments, or feedback, please shoot me an email at roapodcastinfo.
At info dot turtle dot
roapodcastinfo@gmail.com. Otherwise, you can find this episode and others, and including the other shows, at blindninjastudios.com. And you can follow me on Facebook and Instagram at Built in the Arena.
I can just give you a Blind Ninja Studios email address if you want.
That'd be awesome. That'd make my life so much easier. Thanks, folks, and we'll catch you next time.